In this video from IT Free Training, I will be looking at using PowerShell to create and modify user accounts. In your IT career, you may have the need to create a lot of user accounts at once. Using PowerShell is just one of the many different ways you can automate the process of creating a lot of users at once. PowerShell was first released in 2006 as a replacement for the command prompt. Although a lot can be achieved using the command line essentially is designed for batch processing. One command is run after another command. Each command interacts with the operating system exclusively. PowerShell is designed as a task-based scripting language that is integrated with other Windows technologies. If you've done any programming before, you will notice some similarities between PowerShell and programming. The first terminology you should become familiar with in PowerShell is commandlets. A commandlet is a single-featured command. They're designed to implement a specific function by manipulating objects directly. This is one of the core differences between PowerShell and the command line. PowerShell allows you to work directly with objects. In contrast to the command prompt, you would need to pass parameters to utilities or transfer the output from one command to another to achieve a similar result. Commandlets follow a standard naming convention in the form of verb-noun. Some examples are shown here. On the left side, it tells you what action it will perform, for example, getting, setting, or clearing. On the right-hand side, it tells you the target the action will be working on. By using this convention, you can quickly look at a commandlet and determine what it will do. To get a better understanding of how PowerShell works, I will now open PowerShell and run a few commands. PowerShell is found in the Start menu under Programs, Accessories, Windows PowerShell. The most noticeable difference is that the background for PowerShell is dark blue rather than the black border found in the command prompt. Like the command prompt, you can change the current path and you can change directories using the cd command. The commandlet that I will look at is the commandlet write host. This will display a message on the screen, in this case, Hello World. You will find in PowerShell that a number of commands that can be used in the command prompt also work in PowerShell. For example, I could achieve the same result by typing in echo hello world at the command prompt. This may lead you to believe that a lot of command prompt commands also exist in PowerShell. The fact is, the same functionality may exist, but the commandlet used for that command may have changed. Let me explain why. If I run the command alias echo, this will show that there is an alias set up for that command. An alias is another name the PowerShell can use to refer to the commandlet. In this case, when echo is used, it will instead run the commandlet write output. This makes it easier when making the change from the command prompt to PowerShell, as many commandlets have aliases to command prompt style commands. Common commands like dir have aliases so they will work just like in a command prompt. As shown here, when you run the command dir, you are really running the commandlet getChildItem. The next point I want to look at is how variables work in PowerShell. A variable is a storage location which contains information like values. In the case of PowerShell, a variable can also contain an object. All variables start with a $sign. For example, I could create a variable called $DHCP. The variable DHCP can then be used to store data or an object. In this case, I will call the commandlet getService. This commandlet retrieves the object for a service. What has occurred is the getService commandlet has retrieved the object for the service DHCP. In other words, the variable DHCP now contains the object for the DHCP service. To make this a bit clearer, See how I can add period status to the object to retrieve the status for the DHCP service. If I enter in $DHCP followed by a period, I can press the Tab key to cycle through what is available for that variable. You can see how you could create PowerShell scripts that could read the status of services and access them accordingly. For example, if you had an installation script, you could detect if a service is running and then stop the service while the install is running. Once the install is complete, you could then start the service up again. The next task that I will perform is creating a user in Active Directory. To do this, I will retrieve the object for an organizational unit where I want to create the user and store it in a variable. The variable I will use is $OBJOU. This is followed by ADSI in square brackets, followed by LDAP and the distinguished name to where the organizational unit is located in Active Directory. ADSI in square brackets references the ADSI adapter. Think of ADSI as being the same as the GET service commandlet. It retrieves the object in the LDAP query that follows. There are other ways of achieving the same result using commandlets, but these are more complicated than using the ADSI syntax shown. Think of ADSI as the same as a commandlet, but the syntax is different. I now have a variable OBJOU that contains the object for the New York organizational unit. The next step is to create a new user under that organizational unit. I will store the new user in a variable called OBJUser by running the function create under the New York organizational unit. To do this, I use the OBJOU variable followed by period create. This tells PowerShell to create an object under the organizational unit stored in the variable, in this case, New York. Next, you need to enter in the parameters for create. The first parameter is the object type, which is used to indicate which type of object is to be created, in this case, a user. The next parameter is the user name, which will be Charlie Wilson. Once this command has been run, what essentially happens is this. The variable OBJUser now contains an object for the new user. After creating an object for the new user, you will be able to configure more options for the user. This is done by using the variable OBJUser period put. The put function will configure an attribute in the user object. In this case, I'm giving it a pre-Windows 2000 name, which is referred to as a SAM account name. The SAM account name is a username used with old Windows clients like Windows 95. If I now open Active Directory users and computers and open the New York OU, notice that the user account has not been created yet. What has happened is that the object has been created, but none of the changes have been committed as yet. To commit the changes, I need to go back to PowerShell and then run the function setInfo. Once this has been done, if I now go back to Active Directory users and computers and press the F5 key for refresh, you can see that the user account has now been created. This is an important point to remember. Whenever changing attributes in Active Directory, ensure that afterwards you commit the changes, otherwise the changes will be lost. The next task I want to complete in PowerShell is to modify some attributes in a user account that already exists in Active Directory. This is a simpler process than creating a new user. Since the user already exists, I can access the user object directly using one line. I could not do this before because the user needed to be created first using the organizational unit object. For this reason, I will store the user object in the OBJUser variable. Next, I will configure a number of different attributes for the user. The main attributes I will configure will be given name, initials, surname, display name, description, telephone number, and email address. Once I have finished making the changes, remember that once again they need to be committed using the setInfo function. If you do not run this function after making the changes, all the changes will be lost. This has been a short introduction to PowerShell. There is a lot that can be achieved with PowerShell, including more programming tasks like loops and conditional statements. I hope you found this video informative. For more videos in this course, please see our YouTube channel or IT Free Training webpage. Thanks for watching.